I could ask everybody, please, to take their seats. You can take coffee, water, whatever you need with you, and we are gonna start. So good morning, everybody. My name is Kim Wünschmann. I'm the director of the Institute for the History of the German Jews in Hamburg. And it is my pleasure to welcome you here on our last day of the conference. You expected to see Tamara Orr. I'm stepping in for her because unfortunately we had a number of short notice cancellations due to illness. So we rearranged the day and we put panel 1 and panel 2 together in a panel that I now call Rahel Strauss and Rationalizing Welfare, Rationalizing the Household. Yeah. So I'm very, very glad that Katarzyna, Sarah and Laura, you are here and you have brought fascinating papers that I look forward to hear and that will broaden our understanding of the theme. We have two female protagonists. Rahel Strauss was already mentioned in the course of the conference, but Erna Meyer wasn't, so I'm glad that we'll have a chance to bring Erna Meyer into this discussion too. I think that one of the themes could maybe be Zionism, or the question that Maren Kaplan raised yesterday as a key question to probe into this relation with Zionism of female protagonists. Another thing that came to my mind yesterday is a relational approach as such, right? So Jewish female activists vis-a-vis the Jewish community, struggles that are kind of like inner Jewish struggles, but of course also broader struggles with society at large, with other female activists, and so on and so forth. So I think there'll be various avenues that we can pursue in this panel. Before I'll introduce each speaker, I'll give you the schedule for today, which is changed, as you know. So we will run until 11:15 for this first panel, 11:15. Then we'll have a 30-minute coffee break from 11:15 to 11:45. And the concluding panel will run until 1. For those of you who will participate in the guided tour of the Jewish Museum, that will start at 2:30. So 2:30 for the tour, and in between the panel and the tour we'll have lunch. So we'll pursue as we did yesterday. We'll hear all three papers in a row and then have the discussion together afterwards. So it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Katarzyna Czerwonogora. Katarzyna is a sociologist and historian. She completed her MA studies in sociology at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow in Poland. She wrote her PhD dissertation about Zionism's impact on Jewish women's emancipation at Tel Aviv University. In her research, she focuses on Jewish women's modern history in Europe. And Katarzyna also works as an educator at the Yad Vashem School for Holocaust Studies and as a Holocaust testimonies indexer for the USC Shoah Foundation. So Katarzyna, the floor is yours. Oh, not to give that away.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Put this here. How do you do that? And then just close it.
Here?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. This is a panel about Zionism and abortion, but I'm disappointed not to see any demonstrations outside. So, okay, we'll go with this. But the truth is, I'm coming here with a heavy heart. I've been schlepping a lot of grief and pain from Israel, where the war is continuing. And just yesterday, I got a message that another person from my neighborhood, the father of my son's friend, was killed in Lebanon. And yesterday, when I was listening to the stories of our founding mothers, I thought that their legacy of taking care of children and taking care of women is so relevant today. So I invite you to join your thoughts and prayers and energies, however you connect to the world, and dedicate them to the fast end of this ongoing war, so that no other children in Israel and Lebanon and in Gaza won't need to suffer this kind of things. And yet, I'm here to celebrate with you. And I very much appreciate the invitation to take a break from Israel and join you in this celebration of 120 years of Jewish women's self-organization here in Germany. I'm going to speak about one of the Jewish Women's League members, Rahel Strauss, who was also a Zionist, and as we see in my presentation, it led to some troubles in her feminist career. Strauss belonged to the larger cohort of Jewish female and educated women, so the generation of German-speaking Jewish women who benefited from the opening of Western European universities for women and gained education and profession at the turn of the 20th century. Some of these women joined the feminist movements, as you know. Others, while living a feminist life, remained on the margins of politics. And Strauss belonged to those who politicized their interests. What was unique about her was that next to being a feminist, she also developed a strong Zionist loyalty. So many of you already know Strauss, so let's remind her biographical details and let's speak about her for the sake of those who have not yet encountered the story of this woman. So Strauss was born in 1880 in Karlsruhe, a small town in Germany, and she was brought up, oh sorry, there is a mistake. Mind the mistake, 1881. That's not her birthday. This is 1880. She was born to a traditional religious family, and it's important because that's one of the factors of the development of her Zionism. It was atypical for Jews of her generation to be educated in an Orthodox family. Her father was a Hungarian Orthodox rabbi, and the house was kosher, the house was religiously Orthodox, while also being very German. So she received the German Bildung, just as she should, but next to it she had a strong Jewish affiliation, strong Jewish sense of belonging. Then she made this extraordinary educational path. She, by coincidence, you may say, in her town, the first Mädchen Gymnasium, so a school that offered Abitur, final exam to girls, was opened in 1891, and she managed to convince her mother to send her to that school. And there she studied and she gained her Abitur, and she also developed a sense of being a pioneer as a feminist, a young girl who is let's say, paving a path for other girls of her generation for education. Eventually, after many struggles, she also attended the University of Heidelberg as the first female medical student, graduated there in 1905, and was one of the very first female doctors to practice in Germany. Her specialization was gynecology, so another point of attachment to women. And as a pioneering female student, of course, she could not choose otherwise but to become a feminist, and indeed she joined women's initiatives and joined several German feminist organizations, and simply became a German feminist. Now, next to it, she cultivated her Jewish sense of identity at home and with the close community, which gradually received a Zionist framework. So she became what I call a Zionist at home and a German feminist on the street, to paraphrase the the sentence "be a Jew at home and a German on the street." So she developed this public identity of being a German feminist, and her Zionism, her Jewishness, never impacted, or never until some point, did not impact her feminist path. So it was not very unusual for a Jewish woman, of course, to become a member of the German women's movement. Educated Jewish women participated and helped lead the general feminist movement in Germany in the late 19th century in large numbers. Actually, 1/3 of the leaders of the German feminist movement were Jewish women. For example, a pioneer social worker, Alice Salomon, from the Federation of German Women's Associations, Jenny Hirsch, who participated in the first German Women's Congress in Leipzig in 1865, Lina Morgenstern, who was already mentioned here, from the General Association of who organized the first International Congress of Women in Germany, 1896, and none of these women were particularly active in Jewish women's circles. They belonged to general German women's organizations, and that's something that also characterizes Rahel Strauss to a certain point. But it's very special that she has the Zionist association, and I want to tell more about that because usually I switched the slide, sorry. Usually at that time, German Jews, as you probably know, were not particularly sympathetic to Zionism. The progressing emancipation in the German Empire led them to think and believe that being a German citizen is what will bring emancipation, and Zionism was an idea of Eastern European Jews who suffer from anti-Semitism and poverty. So it was a very marginal affiliation for a German Jew at that time. And if German Jews did engage somehow in Zionism, they would usually just send some money or, I don't know, help Eastern European Jews get to Palestine and not go themselves, or not to really link their own fates with Palestine or German or Jewish settlements. In contrast, Rahel Strauss grew up, as I said, in this religious community in Karlsruhe, which received many Ostjuden, Eastern European Jews in the 1880s and 1890s. And since her father was an Orthodox rabbi, the community was Orthodox, she met many of those people because they were around. So among other people, she met Russian Jews from the Bilu emigration, the first wave of emigration to Palestine, on their way, and they told her about Palestine, they told her about Zionism, and this was the first moment she recalls in her memoirs as the moment of her Zionist awakening. And she becomes very aware, together with her brother, they start to follow the politics, European politics, and she's very concerned in 1892 when an openly anti-Semitic party of Harman Allward makes its way to the German parliament, to the Reichstag. And then in 1894, she follows with her brother the Dreyfus Affair, and she becomes convinced that Zionism is more than just a solution for Eastern European Jews, but it must be a solution also for a larger Jewish population with the rising anti-Semitism. In any case, this story had nothing to do with her feminist story. That's amazing how she separates these two paths for most of her young adult life. But at some point, so she has this Zionist affiliations. She joins her brother and other friends. They organize a discussion group in Mannheim where she lives during her studies in Heidelberg. She starts sending money to Jewish National Fund, and she is engaged in the organization Pflanzungsverein Palästina, which grows trees in Palestine. And that's something she does only with her brother and her friends from a very close circle. And next to it, she just joins German feminist organizations. Her first organization is at the University of Heidelberg. At the beginning of her studies, she is looking for a company, but she's the only woman, so she cannot really find any women's associations at the university. So she turns to Jewish associations. But the organizations that function at the University of Heidelberg do not resonate with her sense of Jewishness. She says, like, they only deal with dueling, and they have no interest in Zionism or Judaism. But Denia, the main Jewish Students Association in Heidelberg, she feels very alienated from what they want to be. They want to be like the German students' associations from which they were excluded. And only when more women joined the University of Heidelberg after her, they managed to create this Frauentugend, Frauenmilde. It's the first women's group at the University of Heidelberg. And then after graduating, she also joins more and more groups. Here are only a few examples. Verein Frauenbildung, Frauenstudium, Verein von Frauenstimmrecht. So emancipatory organizations that struggle for feminist goals. At some point, we see a new category of affiliation appears in her life, and this is Jewish women's organizations and Zionist women's organizations. So, for example, she becomes a member of Israelitische Jugendhilfe in Munich, of the Jüdische Frauenbund, and of the Zionist Verband Jüdische Frauen für Kulturarbeit in Palästina. And it's interesting, why suddenly, after so many years of separation, she becomes involved in Jewish women's organizations and Zionist women's organizations, even though the two values were not connected in her life before. So one reason for that is the German Jewish identity politics, or simply anti-Semitism. And now I will explore that. So in the decade before the Great War, meaning 1904, 1914, one's Jewish background becomes a factor in women's social life in Germany. As part of the rising level of anti-Semitic sentiment in German society, bourgeois women's associations began to marginalize their once significant Jewish membership. So at first, Jewish women report on subtle gestures that marginalize them, such as omitting the name of a Jewish member in a speech, or ignoring ties to an organization with Jewish circles, or using stereotypes to describe Jews. And that's all written in scholarship. So if someone is interested, I'll give a reference. So informal strategies of not including Jewish women on boards and choosing not to react to anti-Semitism became common. Over time, non-Jewish feminists gradually carried out more explicit steps. For example, in 1904, at different events organized by the Patriotic Women's Association, the Vaterländische Frauenverein, participants recited poems that mocked Jews. They staged an anti-Semitic play, prompting several Jewish members to quit the organization. The insecurity regarding the status of Jewish women in the German women's movement persisted in the following years. In 1909, the German Academic Women's League restricted its membership to Christian and German-only women. 1909, okay? 1913, Marie Wagner, Silesian Women's League president, declared that a Jewish woman could not speak for the German women's movement. 1913. And these incidents reflected a broader wave of disturbance among women's organizations in Germany. Gertrud Bäumer, the German women's union, Bund Deutscher Frauenverein, had between 1910 and 1919 avoided condemning anti-Semitism when Jewish women turned to her for help. In a confidential letter to a colleague, Alice Bensheimer, from 1914, she stated that it would be better if the person on the top of Bund Deutscher Frauenverein were not Jewish. The tendency penetrated local and nationwide circles, although it did not reach its peak until the next decade. So once they experienced this kind of marginalization and felt the hostile atmosphere, Jewish women created separate organizations that devoted themselves to working for goals similar to those of non-Jewish women's organizations, but with Jewish membership. And they often copied the political and social organizations already existing in German society. And you can agree with me or not, but the establishment of Jewish Women's League was partly the result of that atmosphere in my eyes. New Zionist women's organizations also emerged in the period, such as the Jewish Women's League for Cultural Work in Palestine, the Verband Jüdische Frauen, in 1908, and the Jewish Women's League for Sport and Gymnastics. Scholars often consider their establishment as a manifestation of women's search for gender equality in the Zionist movement in Germany and new cultural models of Jewish femininity. The case of Strauss, however, shows that the increasing participation of women in the Zionist movement also manifested their quest for a safe space for pursuing feminist goals in the face of growing hostility and marginalization in the women's movement. So let's now look at Strauss' experiences. The first event that kind of was in her face was the exclusion of Jewish women from the Heidelberg University Female Graduates Organization that she herself established some years before. But simply the new members, the younger members, one day said that we don't want Jewish members anymore. And together with several non-Jewish graduates, with her friends, who were against segregation, Strauss established an alternative organization for female graduates of the University of Heidelberg, and women of all backgrounds were welcome to join it. It was called Alt-Heidelbergerinnen, so the old Heidelberg female graduates. Strauss, whose identity was previously unrelated to her gender identity, was pushed now to focus on her Jewish identity because she was excluded. Another event I want to bring is from 1912, when her local organization in Munich, the Bavarian Association for Women's Suffrage, hosted a nationwide Congress for women's suffrage. During the proceedings, the board issued a resolution against animal cruelty, such as livestock transport and using animals for work, for which they were unsuitable. It also included a condemnation of Jewish ritual slaughter. Strauss openly spoke against the support of the resolution by feminists. She believed that since half of the organization's members were of Jewish origin, it was inappropriate for the association to support the campaign restricting an essential ritual of Jewish religious life. She also thought that since the association worked for women's suffrage, an issue that had nothing to do with the meat industry, supporting the campaign was not in line with its program. Of course, the episode has a more significant context. Attempts to ban ritual slaughter, which was the pillar of Jewish religious life, were an element of a more considerable practice of regulating Jewish rituals in modern European states. And it was labeled as unclean and cruel. And together with circumcision, the shchita, the Jewish slaughter, were criticized as unfitting the character of modern society, and many groups that had nothing to do with meat industry would criticize it. But for contemporary Jews, it was a way of showing simply anti-Semitism. The case of the Bavarian Association gained national significance. In March 1913, the Jewish Women's League, the Jüdische Frauenbund, declared that ritual slaughter was a Jewish religious law and called for the women's suffrage movement to acknowledge and respect traditional customs. Despite broader protests, the Bavarian Association did not withdraw the resolution. And here is how Rahel Strauss commented on these and other episodes of German women's movements, marginalization or mocking of Jewish customs. What could we do? Explain who was supposed to keep up. In any case, not the Jews. That would be completely ineffective. But Christian women, what did they know about Jews and Judentum? Nothing. Each one had a Jewish friend, but they knew nothing about religion, customs, and tradition. I saw it. We lived close to each other, would sit on the same benches, and were together at the university and went socializing. But we were strangers. So this is a time when Strauss becomes closer to her Jewish peers, to her Jewish feminist peers. And this is also when she confronts some tensions about her Zionist views. And that's the next point of her turn, is that because of her Zionism, she's now marginalized in the Jewish women's organizations, which push her even more forward to Zionist women's groups. So Strauss' Zionist profile was pretty obvious when she became an activist in Munich. Oh, I didn't mention that after graduating from Heidelberg, she married. They settled down in Munich with her husband. And Munich, well, it was not exactly the center of Zionism at the time. It had about 11,000 Jews, but most of them considered Zionism as contradictory to the idea of loyalty towards Germany. And in fact, the place had a reputation of an anti-Zionist center. When Theodor Herzl attempted to organize the first Zionist Congress in Munich, the local community president, Abraham Offner, requested to change the location. The regional unit of Nebrith likewise expressed discontent with organizing a Zionist assembly in town. So they're coming to a pretty anti-Zionist place. And according to Strauss, they become just the only Zionist house in town, and they host all the Zionists that are coming or traveling. And it's obvious for everyone that they're Zionists, but they're like token Zionists for the town, and it's okay. It's okay. She can still be part of everything, and they don't. This doesn't really matters for her contributing to the work of the Jewish women's organizations. Now, the first time she learns about the ambiguity of her Zionist profile is when she becomes involved in the Israelite Youth Aid organization. It was an organization established by Clementine Kremer, known to many of you, a modern philanthropic organization, of course, helping children and young women, because that was the agenda of our mothers. So Strauss gave a lecture about feminine hygiene, because that was her profession and she was an authority in that. And very soon she engaged in the organization of weekly afternoon club for young Jewish women on behalf of this organization. And like other women who contributed to the operation of Youth Aid, she could participate in the organization's board sessions. However, it kept striking her that, and I quote, "No matter how punctual I was, other ladies were already fully engaged in a talk." She did not receive any official response when she asked how was that possible. But in a private conversation, a friend disclosed to her that the board did not appreciate Strauss' Zionist views, and therefore the board always invited her to join later, after they already made all the decisions. So Strauss decided to openly talk about it to the head of the organization, Rebecca Werner. and it's interesting because Rebbetzin Werner was married to a rabbi who belonged to the so-called protest rabbi, a group of 5 German rabbis who opposed the organization of the first Zionist Congress in Munich. Anyway, Rebbetzin Werner was Rahel Strauss's mother's old friend from Posen. That's why she had the courage to, or chutzpah, to go to her and ask, is this the case that because I'm Zionist, you don't invite me to the board meetings? So at first, Rabbi Werner tried to assure her that this was incorrect, but the Rebbetzin later confirmed the organization considers it impossible to take a Zionist on the board, she informed Strauss. So Strauss was outraged that the organization accepted her time and contribution, but could not include her on the board. And she declares in her memoirs that it was like the end of her work for this. The archival records show otherwise, actually. Or even in 1919, she's still working for this organization, but still not as part of the board. So it creates this kind of situation that she can work for the sake of the organization, but she cannot hope for any acknowledgement. You know, she cannot hope for development of a feminist career. She cannot hope for a leadership. Okay. Now, her husband also receives some anti-Zionist notes. In the meantime, her husband becomes like a leader of the local Zionist organization, and he received an anonymous letter calling him to do German Jewry a favor and lead the Eastern European Muckers to Palestine. And also the Munich chapter of the Jewish organization Bnei Brit did not accept him because of his Zionist profile. So the two of them realized that because they're Zionists, the local Jews don't like them. How funny. Now, okay, I want to tell about another anecdote connected directly to the Jewish Women's Organization. So Strauss was involved in Zionism, and at the same time she wanted to be part of the larger platform of the Jewish Women's League. And in 1910, there were supposed to be elections for the local leader of the Munich branch. Okay, and Strauss very much hoped to be elected because she was a young, educated professional, a feminist, and like you would say, an ideal candidate for such a role. Unfortunately, the board kept coming with all kinds of problems with electing her. They said, well, you have a small child, you won't be able to participate in the meetings, you're busy with your work, and so on and so on. And eventually, someone else, Clementine Kramer, who was her friend, okay? But Clementine Kramer was elected to be there. And a delegate from Breslau, Paula Ollendorf, whom we all already know very well, disclosed to her, you know, let us be honest, none of these are the reasons. We just do not want a Zionist on the board, okay? So she comes back to Munich very disappointed, and she realizes again that she cannot hope for any feminist activist career also in the largest organization. So she continues to bring energy to her Zionist projects, and at that time they also decide to go to Palestine with her husband Elias for a study trip. They consider moving to Palestine. They consider joining the Aliyah. Rahel Strauss is, according to her memoirs, she's very excited about moving to Palestine. She sees opportunities for herself as a young doctor. Maybe also she sees some kind of freedom in the colonies, in the settlements. But her husband is like, no way. There's like no place for me, no infrastructure. The Jewish community is very small. There is no work for a Jewish lawyer there, etc., etc. No education for children. We're going back. So they're going back to Munich, and they continue their work there. And of course, Rahel Strauss in these years is mostly engaged in the Jewish in the Women's League for cultural work in Palestine. And this is again a very similar organization to all the German women's organizations that function there. It's just that it's Jewish and it's Zionist. So if we look at the map of women's organizations in Germany, there is this one niche of German women who work for the colonies of Germany in Africa. And they want to support the colonizers in Africa, and they want to support the spread of the German culture to the German colonies. So this association is very much taking its agenda from those organizations. It's just that it has a Jewish profile. Okay. And there, in this organization, Rahel Strauss becomes a local leader. She becomes the leader of the Munich branch of this organization. So she reaches what she aimed for. She's becoming a leader, and she can develop her feminist activism. So we slowly get to the end of my presentation. I want to mention just a change that is happening after the war, because it's not that Rahel Strauss remains involved only in Zionist women's groups. The moment the larger movement allows her to become more active, she switches her attention to the more general groups. And we will hear more about that in the next presentation by Sarah. But I just want to show you that in 1930, her papers, and that's just one of them, is being published on the first pages of the Blätter, the Frauenbund, and she becomes one of its very prominent members. And in 1932, Pappenheim, according to the memoirs of Strauss, suggests that she even runs for the League's national president. And when Strauss is surprised, like, you never wanted me on the local board even because I'm Zionist. So Pappenheim says, you are an embodiment of a living Judaism, and Zionism is a lesser evil than other candidates. Complete detachment from Jewishness. So we all more or less knew that the Jewish Women's League was not in favor of Zionism. Berta Pappenheim went to Palestine to evaluate the Jewish settlements before World War I, and she was not like superficial in her condemnation of Zionism. She saw many problems of Zionism. But then she saw that the larger problem is anti-Semitism and Jews' detachment from their heritage. And that's why Zionism became, as she says, a lesser evil for her. And in those years, Strauss becomes more and more involved in Jüdische Frauenbund. She also works in the Women's Economic School in the countryside, in the Wirtschaftliche Frauenschule auf dem Lande, in Wolfratshausen, about 40 kilometers south of Munich, which is also managed by a Zionist woman, Hannah Bodenheimer, the daughter of Rosa Bodenheimer, one of the Zionist women's leaders. So this shows a shift in Jewish Women's League approach to Zionism, which makes, I think, a fascinating story and raises a lot of questions of how the Jewish German identity politics and the broader history of German Jews can be seen through the history of these women. So as my final thought, I would like to emphasize that in this history we could see that Zionism becomes a haven for Jewish women confronting marginalization. And I'm leaving with some questions, like how do we incorporate the Zionist component into Jewish women's history? And also, how is the tension around Zionism relevant to contemporary Zionism, to contemporary feminism and Jewish feminism? Thank you very much for your attention.